If you're like me, one of your most anticipated movies of 2024 is Pixar's Inside Out 2. If you're like me, you love Inside Out. I personally, it's one of my favorite movies, let alone Pixar. I just think it is such a brilliant, unique, wholly funny and original movie that just comes together so perfectly. So when I heard Inside Out 2 was going to happen, I had some hesitations, as anyone who has a beloved attachment to a series would have. The big question that I had going into this, would Inside Out 2 be a sequel of diminishing returns? That was what I was most worried about stepping into the theater. And for those who do not know, Inside Out 2 is an animated coming-of-age story that follows the mind of Riley Anderson, a 13-year-old about to enter high school, as they navigate new emotions that threaten to take over Riley's head. Together, joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust must traverse Riley's complex mind in order to restore Riley's sense of self as she begins puberty. My hope going into this movie is that it would be worthwhile and that they would actually be able to develop something new and exciting within this series, because I think there is so much comedy, fun, and quite literally emotions that can be explored in it and just really get to traverse, especially as we're dealing with the subject matter of puberty. Which brings me to my second question that I want to answer in this review. The second question is, what components make for a successful Pixar sequel? When we look at all the successful Pixar films, and really just sequels in general, what do they do that makes them successful? And does Inside Out 2 deliver on those, or does it fall short of what it needs to do to succeed? And while going into Inside Out 2 and this idea of diminishing returns, which I had as my first question, I will admit, to start off the movie, I was worried because it goes quick. Now, it is funny. It does have that same energy. You feel Amy Poehler's Joy character. You do feel locked back in. But what I noticed really quick in the first 10 to 15 minutes of it is we follow Riley, and it starts with this hockey game, and we get all the emotions back. We get the jokes. We're in this storytelling mode. And then, bam, puberty happens. It begins. And then we are introduced to all these new emotions, including anxiety, envy, embarrassment, annoy. I probably mispronounced that one. I do not speak French. And it just all happens so quick, and the old emotions are gone and in with the new, and these old emotions are bottled up, and that starts the journey. And that really all does happen in the span of 15 minutes max. So right off the bat, I just noticed this pacing. I was nervous because it just felt like we were being introduced to so much so quickly. And in that span of all these new characters, which includes some of Riley's friends and includes the new 4 emotions, it really felt like in that moment, anxiety was the only one who got developed. And we're already starting this journey. The first act's ended, and it's been about 15 minutes into the movie. And that is where I got worried, where I'm like, ooh, this pacing's going a little bit too quick. It doesn't feel as fleshed out. It doesn't feel as thoughtful as the first movie did. And what I loved about the first Inside Out is how it took its time and really got us to know this character and this world introduced in Riley's mind and the world in which Riley exists in. And another thing I noticed off the bat is there is some recasting. Mindy Kaling does not rejoin the cast. She voiced disgust in this movie. Neither does Bill Hader, who voiced Fear in the last movie. They are replaced. Tony Hale from Arrested Development steps in for Fear, and Liza Lapira steps in for Disgust. I hope I pronounced that name right. And I'll just give some credit real quick. Tony Hale, I thought, was really good as a step-in for Bill Hader. I think he doesn't really miss a beat. I think he really delivers. Liza, I think, has the issue where it does feel like she is doing an impression of Mindy Kaling. So it does feel a little cheaper. And I don't know how to really describe it, but there is this kind of streaming movie direct-to-DVD type feel in it where it's just like, oh, something doesn't feel quite right. It's like in the Aladdin direct-to-DVD sequels where you have someone step in to voice Robin Williams. There is this disconnect, and even if they're doing a fair impression or something that is working, you do just notice something is off. And it felt a little uncanny where I just thought instantly, ooh, that doesn't feel like it did in the last movie. And it feels a little bit just off. And that's where I was starting to get worried, where I just noticed not everything coming together and noticed some of the behind the scenes coming through in the final product. So I will admit, for the first 10 to 15 minutes, I was starting to get a little worried, even though I was enjoying myself. When the film really finds its footing is in the second act, which I think one of the most brilliant things that Pixar does with this movie is they mix animation styles. We see a few new forms of animation in here to really show the complexity of Riley's mind, and also just to show off the incredible animation that Pixar is always able to achieve. I thought this paid off to really good effects, both comedically and storytelling wise. I thought it added a really fun dimension and something new for Pixar that I really hadn't seen in much of their other films. So you have this mix of an animation style that feels a little bit more fresh. You have some strong comedic moments. I really want to just hone in on this idea of doing what you did right with the last movie and making sure you're continuing to do that while not becoming overbearing. And I think one of the strongest comedic performances out of the first, if not the strongest comedic performance, and maybe the standout character of all of them, is Lewis Black's voice as Anger. I think he is so perfectly cast for this role. He's so well utilized in the first film. And what your fear is that they take this character that's beloved for his comedy in the first film, you put him in the second and he becomes overbearing, and then just the comedy doesn't work anymore, and that character just becomes a little bit of a nuisance / annoying. That is not the case with Lewis Black in this movie. Lewis Black's comedy in this movie is as sharp as ever. I thought they were really able to just do a lot with this performance and this character. And I think they added new dimensions to Anger, and it just made it far more fun to have Anger feel more involved in the actual story. So all of a sudden you have strong comedy hitting. You have this introduction of anxiety voiced by Maya Hawke, who's definitely the standout of the four emotions. I would say if there was a huge complaint I had about this movie, is the other three emotions feel a little underdeveloped, especially in comparison to Maya Hawke. But I thought Maya Hawke worked really well as the vocal performance for anxiety in this movie. And you really understand who this character's feeling is the entire time and the chaos and excitement it adds to this world. And she plays so well off Amy Poehler in this movie. I really just want to commend Maya Hawke because I think she does an outstanding job with a really complex character that can get really annoying really quick if done wrong and if written wrong. And I think the writing on this character is tight, and I think Maya Hawke's performance is up to the task for this movie. And that's where I really started to feel this movie kicking in, and I really started to get excited. And I think that is when the movie finds its stride. And it's a 96-minute movie. It starts moving. You really start feeling the pace again, and it just begins to feel like that Pixar magic. But it's still not clicking the same way that Inside Out does. And I think it's just because maybe it's these supporting new emotions don't feel as developed as the old ones. But then the third act hits, and we talk about what components make for a successful sequel, and I think we need to talk about the third act without spoiling the third act at all. But I think what Pixar does so well is obviously they've always been good at playing with people's emotions and telling profoundly beautiful stories in a simple, understanding way that someone as young as 5 can understand it and someone as old as 100 would understand it. Like, there is something so universal about their storytelling. And when they can capture that, that's when they find something incredibly beautiful. And that's what they achieve in Inside Out 2. This idea of emotions and these blend of emotions. And when we get into the complexity, that is when this movie really works. I think when a sequel is successful, they are able to take what works well in the first film and add on these components and give them more room to grow and develop, either in new characters, new storylines, and just able to shake up this world. So still feeling as original as the first film did, while taking the old characters that we know and adding new layers and development to that. Inside Out 2 does this exceptionally with the emotions. I think one thing that I noticed right away in this movie is as Riley gets older, these emotions get more complicated and they get more nuanced. We see joy display anger in this film. We see anger show fear and kindness. We see disgust show joy. Like, it's all in there, and you start seeing how these emotions feed off each other, how they all blend together, and how they all need each other to function and to serve Riley. And I thought that was such a beautiful message about aging and the complexities that come with puberty as we grow. And they take that which works so well as the emotions. They take complex ideas of the mind and simplify it in a way that is fun and understandable. And they take the comedy. Like I said, Lewis Black's anger, all those components are in here. I think the writing is as sharp as ever comedically. And then what they do is in this third act, and this whole film, it's really an exploration of Riley's self-worth and her beliefs and how those develop as her mind becomes more complex and how she has to learn and go through that, as everyone has to do through puberty. And that's where the film really hits an emotional stride for me that I just found wholly engaging, especially as we hit the third act. I am not ashamed to admit I found this movie profoundly touching and beautiful, especially in this film's third act. The emotional climax that this film achieves, I think, is incredibly rewarding, especially as it deals with these characters of anxiety, as it deals with growing up, discovering self-worth. Anyone who's really had questions about that, which I think is probably most people, are really going to connect with ideas of it. But specifically, anyone who's dealt with extreme anxiety, who's struggled with self-worth and being able to love yourself. I found the third act just incredibly emotional. They take something so complicated in human emotion, and it's not that they simplify it, because it's not just simplifying emotions. They are able to explain the complexity in a way that is understandable for young and old. And that's a hard thing to do, especially as we are all paradoxes, and they explain the paradoxes of humanity and how that makes us who we are. And it was just such an emotional, beautiful journey to go on that any of the gripes that I had in the first act are wholly wiped away by the time we get to the end of this movie. Does Inside Out 2 succeed at every turn? It does not, but does Inside Out 2 deliver when the film needs to deliver? I think it does so in strides, and I really loved this film. I really was over the moon for this movie, and I just think that is when Pixar is working its best. When it succeeds, it's able to bring in new characters who reshape our protagonists. And I think all of the strongest Pixar sequels do that. Toy Story is probably the best example, but also even in lesser sequels for Pixar, like Finding Dory, I think the addition of new characters really add a lot to that. And here, Maya Hawke's introduction of anxiety really reshapes who Riley is and who our understanding of all these emotions are in this world. And it's just really rewarding to go through. I think Inside Out 2 is certainly one of my favorite Pixar films, especially one of my favorite Pixar films of the past few years. As someone who loves the first Inside Out, I found it so rewarding to go back to, and I just had a lot of fun being back in this world and what this film is able to achieve. And I think everyone deserves just incredible praise for this, and I'm so happy that Inside Out 2 is great. I was so afraid that this movie wasn't going to be good, but it lived and surpassed my expectations, and I cannot wait for people to see this movie. Let me know what you think of this movie when you finally get the chance to see it this Friday. Again, my name is Ben Friedman, and if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more reviews. Thank you all for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.